Hello, everyone. My name is Nick Inferno, and welcome back to the last of our individual Legacy Year 1 Wave rankings, Wave 3, which was definitely a big improvement over Wave 2. Wave 2 is just kind of good. Wave 3 is definitely, I'd say, more on par with Wave 1. A little weaker, but mostly on par. Which is weird because this wave has some very interesting figures, to say the least. A few retools and a few new molds that ended up being some of the weaker figures of the wave. But what's weird about this wave to me is that all of the size classes are right next to each other. Like, all the deluxes are right next to each other, all the Voyagers are next to each other, same with the cores, and then, of course, there's only one leader, but, like, it's weird, because usually in the other waves, all the figures would be kind of spread out depending on their class. You'd get like a core, then a deluxe, then a Voyager, then a deluxe, then a leader, that kind of thing. Like, take for example Wave 4, sure, Breakdown, Scrap Hook, and Needle Nose are right next to each other on the list, but you have Leo Prime separating them from Hotshot. Here, all the figures in each size class are right next to each other on the list. I don't know how that happened, but it might make for the most boring of these three videos, but regardless, let's get into it. Last place at number 9. Yep, 9. This wave has the least amount of figures in it. Deluxe Class Skullgrin. This figure does everything pretty averagely, I'd say. Looks pretty awesome in robot mode with how it combined the robot mode of the inner robot with the head of the Pretender shell. Like, yeah, that was a great decision, even though it's missing its lower jaw. And it does have some pretty cool weapons. Posing's pretty average, with the best joint just being the elbows. Transformation is pretty decent. A lot of moving parts around, and some parts are a bit too tight, but I can look past it. What really puts this thing at the bottom is that shitty alt mode. Like, how I said Soundwave turns into a thing? Yeah, this turns into even less of a thing. You cannot tell me what this is. Do not tell me that this is a half hover tank. That's not a thing that will ever exist, because there is no reason for it to ever exist. Why is there treads back here and nothing up here? If you say this part hovers, why does it have treads? If you say it rolls, what's going on up here? This entire alt mode is an enigma. And it's really the reason why this thing's at the bottom of the list, because every time I think of this thing, I think of how bad the alt mode is. Which really sucks, because if this was better, this could have actually been a great figure. Everything else, it's doing pretty well. It's just that it's absolutely flunking one of the aspects. So yeah, I did hope it was better, but it's still fine. Number 8, Deluxe Class Point Blank. Now, I will say, this thing is also flunking an aspect pretty hard, that being the posing. While below the waist, it's actually fairly above average, it has the worst upper body in terms of posing I've ever seen. These elbows can only bend 40 degrees. Like, what the hell? Yes, I know that's an issue that Gamer Edition Megatron had with his knees, but I'm more forgiving of the knees than the elbows. Like, those should at least be able to bend 90 degrees, and the joint for the swivel is in the forearm, so you can't even get this thing out of the way. It's going to bend. It's going to have limited bend no matter where the arm is rotated. And then in general, the way this thing poses is just kind of strange. It has no excuse to be missing wrists, and the shoulders are just weird with how they constantly just put the forearms at angles. The transformation's also a little bit frustrating, but the two modes at least look decent. I thought it looked weird from the San Diego Comic-Con pictures. I guess I could have just said the SDCC pictures. But in hand, I think it actually looks pretty cool and has a pretty nice physique. And I do like the alt mode a lot, and it rolls pretty decently. This was the first figure to come with a Target Master, and I kind of wish it didn't. Kind of wish that plastic went to somewhere else, but this is still a fairly decent figure. Number 7 is Deluxe Class Crankcase. This is a retool of Skids, and probably the lesser of the two. One reason being that the QC is just not as great. The knees are fairly loose, as are... Actually, it's really just the knees. But one really frustrating thing is that the torso doesn't tab in nearly as well. It constantly wants to pop up whenever I try to handle it, and it's a very soft tab in, so it barely stays in place. Plus, this thing has a much worse head plate that doesn't blend in nearly as well. And also worse weapons. I don't know why couldn't have just been screw accuracy, just have it plastered on the chest. It would have looked better that way. Transformation is just the skids again. Still kind of frustrating in some spots, but I do like the way the doors work, and at least they're not going to spring open. And then the SUV mode actually looks pretty great if you ignore the weird gap in the hood. Yeah, that's an unfortunate side effect of the retooled plate, but still a fairly decent retool and an overall good figure. Where are we? Number 7. Deluxe Class Dead End. Don't worry, this is the last of the deluxes, I promise. So, like with like with Crankcase, this is a retool of a figure from Wave 1, this time being of drag strip. And it's pretty much worse in most aspects. Robot mode looks fairly decent, despite how thick some of it looks. Posability is definitely worse. It barely pulls 90 degrees in most areas, and the QC is definitely worse on this one. Transformation, still pretty good, but the pegging stuff in takes a lot more force and it's very uncomfortable. And the Porsche mode is very good if you ignore the back end. The whole thing with that tab is just, I don't know what's going on with that. But it's still pretty good. It's using the bones of a fantastic figure, so I don't think it really could have done much worse. As it is, this is definitely the weaker of the two molds. And number 6 is Voyager Class Armada Starscream. Wait, hold on, where were we at? I'm sorry, I'm losing track. 9, 10. Yeah, actually, I think we're at number 5. Excuse me. Yeah, number 5, Armada Starscream. Man, if the QC on this thing was better, it would be higher. This thing has infamously bad QC because of the hips. That and the transformation is, a little finicky, but otherwise it is absolutely nailing everything else. Excellent robot, excellent vehicle, and just awesome posing, especially with the sword-wielding wrists. It really is just the quality control that's bringing it down. Otherwise, this could have been a fantastic figure. Speaking of figures that were almost fantastic, number 4 is Voyager Class Inferno. This is one of those cases where it's doing almost everything right. It poses excellently, and it looks awesome in both modes, especially the Ant mode. The Ant mode's giant. I should probably mention that. This thing is massive. And in robot mode, it's one of the bigger Voyagers. But the transformation is just not that fun, with just moving the parts into different areas, just lining everything up correctly, and some things just not doing what you want them to do. It brings down what could otherwise have been a fantastic figure. That's something I'm noticing with the Voyagers, is that they could have been fantastic, and they're still great. They just have one aspect that's mucking them up. But I still love this figure, and definitely one I'd recommend if you can find it. So number 3 is Core Class Soundwave, the best core class from Kingdom. So of course repacking it was going to be. Of course, I'd be absolutely down with it being repacked. I mean, I wasn't going to pick it up, but I did pick up the Sound Blaster from Wave 4. And this is a figure that poses pretty averagely and does everything else just fantastic. For a $10 Soundwave, both modes look pretty excellent, and the transformation is a very fun core class conversion. It's nice. And it's just an awesome little pocket cassette player Soundwave. Runner-up is Core Class Bomb Burst. One of those figures that I was really excited for, and it didn't disappoint. I'd say that this probably does some things weaker than Soundwave, but some things better. Transformation is still pretty simple, but it gets the job done. The VTOL copter mode looks pretty decent. And the robot mode is a very nice interpretation of the character. Like, it's not the most accurate thing, but for what it is, it's awesome. And the posability is actually a little bit better by having ankles and a waist. So yeah, compared to Soundwave, well, just that mold in general, this thing is kind of neck and neck with it. But this was my favorite court class for a time. And then, of course, in first place is Leader Class Dragon Megatron. This is still Legacy's best leader class, and unless one of the leaders from next year does something excellent, I need to stop using that word, does something special, this thing's probably not going to get dethroned anytime soon. This does everything right. Awesome robot mode, awesome dragon mode, like extremely awesome robot mode, excellent posing, and a pretty fun transformation with some annoying parts, but overall a fun process. Plus, it's very sturdy with all the different ratchets and that wingspan. This is the only beast mode that I would be confident in calling majestic. So yeah, for leader class in Legacy, I don't see this getting dethroned anytime soon. And repacking it in Wave 4 was definitely a good idea considering how weak that wave is. Anyways, guys, that's going to be it for my ranking of Wave 3. If you enjoyed, you know what to do. I'm not going to bore you with all the generic stuff. I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care, and Godspeed.